starting this mental health live with a puppy in my hands. And I know it's not the normal kind of start to my mental health live, but this is Dolly. Aren't you Dolly? Dolly is a new addition to my family. Obviously, I lost my best friend, my dog of 18 and a half years, a few days ago. So basically, I decided that I wasn't going to get another big dog anyway, because I just wanted to honour the relationship that I'd had with Poppy for a long time. And then when I'm older and retired, which is probably never going to happen, I'm going to get a big dog then. But this dog is the sister of the dog I lost last year. It was horrible. I tragically lost my 3-year-old beautiful Chihuahua, and I got in touch with the breeder ages ago and said if she ever had another grey fluffy Chihuahua, because she has Chihuahuas that are straight head, so it's really rare, and she got a grey fluffy Chihuahua. So this is Dolly Moo. So I thought I'd share it with you before I put her down on the floor to cause havoc. There we go. Also, I'm not on Facebook today because Facebook have banned me for 30 days on my page because I shared a photograph of a thumbnail for my YouTube channel with a criminal on, and somebody decided to report me for sharing hate stuff. Can't stop the trolls from being absolutely insane, but nonetheless, lesson learned, won't put anything on about my crime stuff because people who are malicious are doing that. But that's why I can't do a mental health live on Facebook, sadly. Apologies, it's not me, it's what trolls like to do, which is a shame because obviously I'm trying to do something for mental health, but that says something about their mental health, I think, realistically, doesn't it? So I've got loads of questions that have come up, but hopefully tonight Pete's going to be able to make sure that the new ones that are coming up arrive, so to speak. So I'll get started in a minute. I hope we're all okay. I hope everyone's feeling all right at the moment. I know that there's still a lot of unrest, and I also appreciate that the government have been, shall we say, less than honest with us in the way that they've behaved compared to how we've behaved. And I think that that's a real challenge for a lot of people at the moment. And I think it's also making people feel afraid about what's to come. And I just say, don't worry about it. The statistic is we need 3.5% of us to say no to something and it won't ever happen. And I think that's a really reassuring thing to think about, that only 3.5 out of 100 people need to say no to something for it not to happen. And I think we should all feel very reassured by that knowledge. Certainly I am. Certainly I know a lot more than 3.5 people out of 100 people who aren't happy with the way that we're being told our lives are going to be. And I think instead of getting really nervous about things and really scared and feeling like there are no other options, for mental health you always need to feel a level of self-control and autonomy of your world. So that's what you've got to hang on to at the moment. We're going to have a level of control and autonomy over our world. And I stand completely in my truth with that because, as you know, I've had to make certain sacrifices to ensure that I can still have a voice. And let me tell you, I would rather be one of those 3.5 out of 100 who has that voice and uses it loudly, because that actually helps me to feel like an authentic person who's loyal to my beliefs and who's loyal to other people's mental health and wellness. So just be aware of that. Only 3.5 people will need to say no to something and it won't happen. Right, let's get on with it. Emma, do you have any tips for a nervous flyer? I still struggle with health anxiety, although nowhere near the level I was at before, thanks to hypnotherapy. It's great that you did hypnotherapy. But I don't know why when it comes to flying, I get so nervous that something medically might happen to me whilst flying, and it makes me so nervous and worried. I think that when you've suffered from health anxiety and you've done really well in hypnotherapy, first of all, let me highlight the fact that hypnotherapy works for you, and therefore there is an option to always return and have a little bit more hypnotherapy, but specifically to flying and health anxiety related issues. I think that when you consider the survival mechanism that's within most of us, people like me have a pretty poor survival mechanism in the fact that I like throwing myself out of planes and free falling or doing some wing walking that I'm planning. People would say that that makes me quite brave, but actually you could also argue that makes me a bit irresponsible because the plane might crash and I would put myself in a very precarious situation doing that. So on a survival level, my instinct for survival is maybe a little bit less refined than yours, whereas you think, well, getting in this plane, there could be A, B, and C that could happen, so that catastrophizing occurs. And also there's a level of claustrophobia because you're in with lots of other people. And then there's a level of fear about people's perceptions of you, because obviously there'll be an audience and you won't be able to escape that audience if something happens to you. So there are a lot of these factors that play into the fear. So first of all, just like kind of take a step back and go, okay, that really makes sense, that even though in my day-to-day life where I've got this control over my environment, I know where I'm going, I know I can leave, I've got people who can support me, I've managed to overcome it in those situations, you're additionalizing all of these extra anxiety factors when you get in a plane. So first of all, realize that you're not failing in knowing how to manage your anxiety at that point. It's just that the level of anxiety has escalated just that little bit more than you're comfortable with dealing with, and therefore it's triggered the more unmanageable issues that you faced previous to this. So there are a few things you could do. So as I said, I would strongly recommend talking to your hypnotherapist who's talked to you about that before, because that's obviously something that works. Secondly, there's something called psychological anchoring, and psychological anchoring is really helpful as well. And what that does basically is it helps you to concentrate on memories that are really positive whilst using your thumb and your middle finger, or you can use other things, I'm thumb and middle finger, and you kind of amplify during like meditative experiences these really positive feelings. I always go for the moment they handed my first child into my arms, because it was like such a profound experience and it's so joyful. So when I go to the dentist, I'm always in that space. I meditate on going back to that space and amplifying those feelings. I really don't like having my teeth messed with, etc. I don't like the invasion of having the dentist so intimately with my mouth. But nonetheless, you can do the same with anchoring. So look at psychological anchoring. There's a good example of it on my YouTube site, which kind of goes through a video of how to do it. Diaphragmatic breathing is also really helpful. Again, because the more you use things that will reduce the levels of anxiety, the less you're going to feel that rise in it when you get in the plane. And also on top of that, I do some normalization exercises, which is just where you say, it makes sense that I feel a little bit nervous when I go on a plane. And therefore it makes sense logically that therefore my anxiety about being seen as somebody with a medical problem on a plane would feel more vulnerable, and I would be feeling more like people would be looking at me. And then you ask yourself, okay, well, let's take that example. Let's just go for something. It happens, you have a panic attack, or you get unwell, you get a terrible migraine, get sick, as I have done on a plane before now. What's the worst case scenario? Because often with anxiety, we don't ask ourselves the root of what that fear is. And the worst case scenario is you'll get ill, you'll get dealt with appropriately by those who are helping you. You'll never see those people who are on the plane with you again, so that's no worry about it. And you'll get well and move on. And it's like, tackle the fear, tackle the underlying issue. The worst case scenario is not worst, because you'll always be able to move on from it. And I don't think we do enough of that with anxiety work. We kind of catastrophize and have these big fears, but we don't explore what the fears represent and how we can move past them. So I do all of those things. I would like you to cover at some point in your clinic today, toxic love. I'm not looking for agony aunt type advice, but the psychology of it and how to use it to walk away for good. Backstory if you're interested. I have an ex-partner who is very emotionally abusive and sometimes physically, but I just can't seem to fall out of love with him. I allow him to walk in and out of my life and parade women in front of me, and I just want to know how I can let go of the connection. It absolutely drains my mental health every time he walks away. I won't allow myself to have boundaries with him, and it's so unhealthy that I really won't let go. I want to let go. I'm waffling now, but it would be great for you to talk about the psychology of this and how to get out of this situation. Thank you for being so great to listen to. Well, I've not answered your question yet, so you might be questioning that in a minute. So I love the bit about, I'm not looking for an agony aunt bit. It's like, okay, I'm not looking for an agony aunt bit, so I'm going to try to go more into the, shall we say, more actually applied research level of what we're doing at this point. So first of all, the fact that you are somebody who recognizes that you are in what I know and call a bad love situation. I often think that we fail to respect people who are in love with people who are bad for them, because there is this idea that they are not really in love, because love is meant to be this beautiful experience where everybody is happy, and even in the hard times we work together and it's kind of equal, and if it's not like that, then it's not love. And that's really unfair. People are not stupid. They fall in love for a whole range of reasons, and fundamentally, when they feel love, they feel love. but sometimes we are in a bad love situation. And when we are in a bad love situation, we feel all the feelings that we feel when we're falling in love in a good way, but it has this additional layer, and the additional layer is, as you know, toxicity. And also, what you're describing there is a consistent willingness of your partner, stroke ex sometimes, to use the love that you have for him against you. So that's really toxic, because first of all, he builds you up, which is that sense of, oh, he's coming back into my life. And then he withdraws that support just as you've potentially started to either get comfortable or start to believe the lies that he's told you in returning, and you let your defenses down. He then sees that, he enjoys exploiting that, and then he goes away and parades women in front of you, because it's a metaphorical but very literal way of punishing you for absolutely no reason other than he likes to witness your pain. Now, the pain cycle is an interesting one, because arguably people will say, well, if it's painful, why would you stay? But arguably, if it's painful, why would you take heroin when it costs you so dearly? Why would you drink heavily when it costs you so dearly? Why would you do all these things that make you feel in pain if it costs you so dearly? Well, because people do. Because pain and pleasure are very closely intertwined. We don't like coming off heroin because it's very painful, but when we take heroin, it's not. We don't like coming out of a relationship that's very painful because it hurts, and when we're in it, we feel this joy and love, and so on and so forth. So the pain-pleasure cycle is a very difficult one to break. And I guess it comes down to, you're asking the question, how do I get myself out of it? Well, unfortunately, it's like any detox. And unfortunately, it is about the same experience of detox. It's going to really hurt. It's going to cause cold turkey. You're going to waver. You're going to want him back. You're going to panic that other people have got him. You're going to go through all the same circumstances as letting go of something that's really bad for us, but that feels good at times, a bit like addiction. And cold turkey is the only way forward. You're asking me, why am I doing it? Well, you're doing it because it feels good in the good times. You're doing it because you find him attractive. You're doing it because probably the sex is good when he comes back and makes you feel like actually he's made a mistake. You're doing it because you feel that if you can prove to yourself that you can get this guy tamed, that you can have him, then you're worthy. But of course, you're worthy without him. That's the art of good love. We start with ourselves and we're like, I deserve so much more than this. I deserve to be valued, supported, cared for, embraced, valued, given a sense of being adored. They're good qualities that make you stay in a relationship that has good love associated with it. You're doing this because you don't have a sense of your worth. And intrinsically, self-worth and esteem are both really linked to this understanding that another person has to reflect that level of value. If we don't feel great about ourselves, if we don't truly like ourselves, I'm not going to say love ourselves, because hell, I don't love myself a lot of the time. You know, I tend to like myself. Sometimes I love myself. Most of the time I just like myself. I'm kind of like, I'm better than not being, you know, I could be less than, but I'm all right, if that makes sense. I'm good enough. But if you don't have that, then somebody else is going to walk into your world and reflect what you give yourself, which is bad at the moment, because you're expecting that even though these people treat you horribly and this guy is toxic towards you and this guy punishes you and taunts you, that somehow that's something you deserve in a relationship, and you don't. So it's more about you going, all right, okay, I realise that now. I'm in a toxic situation with somebody who causes bad love for me, taunts me, abuses me and hurts me. And what I have to do now is acknowledge that I need to take some time out to work on me, recognise that no one has the right to do that to me, and then more importantly, refuse to ever entertain a relationship with somebody who does not make me feel good all that time, and even in the bad times reminds me that they are still rooting for me and with me, even if we have conflicts in moments in time, because no relationship is perfect. It's really important to do that. But the psychology of it is like addiction. Apart from your cold turkey is with a human being that you then have to avoid and block and literally cold turkey away from them until you feel safe enough to acknowledge that they're not worthy of who you are, and then you move forward. Okay, next one. Hi, oh, he's going up and down. It's going up and down, guys. I can't even see what's happening here. We've postponed our wedding twice now. Oh, just bloody awful that this is happening. We've postponed our wedding twice now, and our day is now supposed to be on the 26th of February. With everything in the news this week, I'm extremely anxious about it. Won't go ahead, and we won't get the day we planned. My partner and I have agreed that we will just get married at a registry office other than postponing again, or get married at the next available opportunity with limited guests. But COVID has severely ruined the excitement for me just when I was getting back to arranging everything again. I just don't know how I will cope if we go into another lockdown. I know the marriage is about who you're marrying, but it would be nice to have all our family there to celebrate with who we're staying, as it's been planned for 3 years. No, a marriage isn't just about who you're marrying. I mean, we can pretend it is, and of course, on one level, that is definitely who you're marrying, and therefore, I get the idea that when it comes down to it, you two are going to be the ones making the vows. But no, it's not just about you, and you know that, and that's why it feels so upsetting for you. If somebody wants to go off to Gretna Green, or wants to go to Las Vegas, or just wants to go to the registry office, not a problem. Whatever works for you. But my love, if you have planned a wedding and you've got the dress and the bridesmaids and the buffet and the disco, and this is your moment where you get to show the world that you found that person that you don't just want to spend your life with, but that you want to take vows in front of people to let them know that this person is the love of your life. That is a massive moment, one of the most pivotal moments that you'll ever experience. Probably the only one that will beat that is having a child, because that's lifelong and highly expensive, more expensive than a wedding, in fact. But this is absolutely devastating for you. Look, shall I tell you my philosophy? My philosophy is if enough of us just say, this is ridiculous, we're not going to do it, it won't happen anyway. Hospitality is on its knees, and I don't think that it's a very good idea for them to start playing around with us psychologically this way. Certainly, it's not something that I'm going to agree with, and it's certainly not something that I'm going to follow. I don't think it's healthy for any of us to have these conversations where we feel that after 2 years nearly, it's okay for us to give up our freedoms again. I think there has to be a whole new approach to that, and I'm sure that there will be many, many people fighting for that. So instead of feeling anxious and out of control and without any power, why not think about being fully in control and taking back some of that power and being like, well, no, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to be aware that I can turn that anxiety into some kind of motion and advocacy and a willingness to speak out and say, no, I'm a bride, I'm affected by that, I'm not having it, and let people know your story. That would be really helpful as well. And then I guess the thing about if you do come down to the fact that you go to the registry office to get married because, you don't want to wait, I think that's a really sensible idea. If this somehow goes ahead and we all get taken away if we don't comply, which isn't going to happen. But nonetheless, if you have come to that conclusion, I think that's a good conclusion in the fact that you go, right, no one's going to stop me marrying the man of my dreams, the person I love. But I don't think you should ever shelve that party. I don't think you should ever shelve that white dress. And, I think you should come to a point where you do enjoy arranging it again, whenever that is. But certainly don't let them steal your joy. They have no right. They've stolen our joy for 2 years. They had parties when we were all locked down. I made the papers. I made the Mail on freaking Sunday and the Metro for a joke tweet I wrote to the Prime Minister, saying that if they didn't give me evidence of tears working, I would throw a party and take cake to my 82-year-old neighbour, my fictional 82-year-old neighbour. That's what they did to me whilst they were all having a party. So I think that we also have to just be resistant to these kind of narratives that we're being fed in the press, and instead acknowledge that we all are autonomous creatures with autonomy of our own bodies and rights to our freedom, our God-given rights, not our state-given rights. So like I said, try to think more about, okay, you're going to have that day, it's going to be amazing, it may be separate to when you get married, that's okay, it's still going to be amazing, and don't let them steal your joy. Look, it might not be the exact date, but I wouldn't minimise your wedding. This is my personal belief. I'm not saying a professional one. It's fine to do whatever you want. But I think you deserve the big deal. I think most people listening will think that. If you shelve, the big church wedding or whatever, or the venue because, it's not happening, don't shelve the day. Go and hire somewhere when everything's back to normal if you feel safe in that matter. If you want to just go and get married with your parents and his parents and a few witnesses in the register office, nice one. But absolutely get that day wherever it is. If you want to wait another year to have that big day, do it. Don't let anyone steal that. It's more than just standing in front of somebody saying I do. It's a celebration, it's pivotal, it's life-changing, and it's shared. That's what makes a great wedding. And of course you feel anxious about that, so take the power back. Be like, damn straight, I'm getting married to you, but damn straight, I am having my wedding day. You want the big do. Why not? It was great. It's fantastic getting married. It's so much fun and the discos are amazing. In fact, invite me. Do you have any advice for me? I'm in my final year doing my dissertation. I do. This is it. This is the last bit. It's incredibly boring at times. You have to do a lot more hours. You don't have to go out as much as you would. But I'm assuming the dissertation in your final year of your undergrad degree is still around 10 to 12,000 words. Break it down into 5 to 6 2,000 word essays. Do it diligently. Don't plagiarize. Work really hard. And then enjoy the rewards of those efforts. The advice for your final dissertation as well is, when you do the dissertation, make sure it's an interest that you really have. Like, think about something that you really feel inspired by, explore it, research it, write it, but do something on something you love. I wrote my master's dissertation on eating disorders and I was just so invested in it that it really didn't feel like work. I mean, the literature review wasn't the most fun thing, but still it was great because you're reading about other people who do those things. So figure out what it is that really inspires you and choose a subject matter that makes you feel like it's not going to be that much of an effort, and then do it as early as possible. Do it as early as possible. Don't wait till the last minute. Oh, I would still have nightmares if I'd left mine to the last minute. You know, do it diligently. It's exciting because this is the last bit of university that you're going to do before you make another choice to maybe do a master's or a PhD or go into the world of work. God, I wish I'd stayed in academia for a lot longer than I did. But you know, you think you've got to get a job, don't you? And these days it's very expensive to go to university, with respect. Hi Emma, I hope you're well. I'm sorry to see the passing of your lovely dog. It was beautiful and agony all in the same moment. Very much appreciate it. It was the strangest experience. I felt like love's executioner. I really did. But nonetheless, it was a beautiful experience and I feel very blessed for all the years that I had with her. And I cannot get used to not having the presence of her in my home, and I keep expecting that she's under the table when I'm sat there. And then I put my chair in and realise that it doesn't get stuck on a dog, which it used to do. I used to push my chair and then I'd know I'd pushed it in fair enough and it was halfway out of the table because she'd always just be there at my feet. But thank you, you've all been wonderful about that. I really feel lost at the moment. I don't know what I want to do in my life. My job is causing me a lot of stress and I'm not enjoying it at the moment, but I just feel stuck. With all the government manipulation over COVID, I just feel like it's extremely tough and I'm not enjoying it anymore. I just feel like there's nothing good to look forward to anymore. How can I find the joy in life again and find the motivation to find something in life that I really enjoy? Rather than doing the same stressful thing Monday to Friday, I don't even know where to begin. You're in a really good place. I know that's going to sound counter to what you've just said, but this is a really good place. This is a great place. You know what? So many people go through life hating what they do and doing nothing about it, and it just drives me insane. Never do a job you hate. Stop it. And when people say, oh, well, people have to do jobs that they hate. No, they don't. No, they don't. And it's nothing to do with qualifications. I work with a lot of people in my life who've had no qualifications and they earn 20 times what I'll ever earn. It's about passion. It's about doing something you feel naturally acclimatized to do and you have the wherewithal and the passion to do it. You're in a good place. You felt demotivated. You're not inspired by your job. You feel stuck, and the great thing about feeling stuck is it comes before growth. How do you know that you're going to progress and move on without feeling stuck? It is the very feeling that is the most progressive. It feels horrible. We don't like it. It makes us feel frustrated, and it's absolutely essential. Where you are now is probably one of the most progressive, creative, and hopeful places you can possibly be, because you're going to let go of what isn't working and you're going to move through to something that is. So the question to ask yourself now is, forget the bigger picture. Forget the world's gone a bit crazy. Forget vaccine passports. Forget mandates for anything. Forget ridiculous suggestions about locking down again. Not in the ballpark for the majority of us in the UK who have been completely hoodwinked by our own government. So let's just put all of that aside and let's bring it back down to basics. In spite of all that stuff still going on, there's millions of jobs, millions of opportunities, millions of exciting potential things that you can do, including thinking about a career overseas, a career change completely, studying again, going and doing some volunteer work somewhere insane in the world. All these things are possible because you're at a point where you're giving up something that isn't possible for you anymore. So you need to sit down, and I mean it, strategy is everything. Sit down, work out when you feel happiest. Everyone has it. It's the same when we do things like anxiety work or depression work. I want you to look for a place where you're content, the place that you feel most at peace. So for me, I feel most at peace when I'm either with my kids, I love being a mum, or when I'm doing this, when I'm communicating with people, when I'm having conversations with people. This is where I feel most comfortable. So I just decided that that's what I'd spend my life doing. And you know what? The beauty of that is if you spend your life doing something that you're naturally pretty comfortable with and potentially good at, it amplifies your potential. You'll have exactly the same, but you need to sit down and be like, okay, when am I most peaceful? When do I feel most content? When do I feel most hopeful? What is it these messages are giving me? There will be things in your head where you think to yourself, you know what? When I think about doing that, I just feel inspired and hopeful and life feels technicaler. And when I think about going there, I feel excited and motivated. These are the things that are informing us of what we need to know, much like all the things that you've just discussed about your job is informing you that you are absolutely right. It is time to move on. But don't feel like stuck, and don't believe this feeling is abstract. It's bringing into sharp focus what you need, what you deserve, what's next. So sit down, get strategic. There is a law called Pareto's Law. Changed my life completely. It says 80% of what you do success-wise, as in 80% of the stuff that brings you success comes from 20% of your actions. So I was like, what's that? 80% of the success I have comes from only 20% of the things I do, and the rest are kind of irrelevant. And so I thought, right, and I packed my job in, literally, and I concentrated on the 20% that I'm good at, which is communication, rational thinking and logic to some degree, solutions, and people. That's it. And I concentrated all my efforts on that area of my personality for my work, and I never looked back. Because that's my natural tenacity and capacity, and that's my skill base that actually, if I focus on, gives me the best benefit and reward, and I enjoy doing it. What is your 20% that you get most of your success from? How can you amplify that? Stop feeling afraid of this feeling. Stop feeling afraid of being stuck. It's the best place. It's where every bit of movement begins. And so you are about to move on. And you'll remember what I said to you at some point. There's going to be a day you might be sat round a campfire in Darwin, Australia, after going through Kakadu National Park and being in awe of the environment, and you'll sit and something will come to you and it'll be like Emma Kenny said. There'll be a moment where you'll be like so grateful for the stuckness because it brought you to this point of change. That's what's going to happen. Hi Emma, could you do something tonight on self-harm? I relapsed after 2 years yesterday and now I'm beating myself up about it. Only if you have time, thanks. The classic self-harmer writing to me there. Only if you have time, thanks. As if your needs are not as important as everybody else's, which is why you fill up with so much frustration, loneliness, sadness, and all these things, and then you hurt you because you're not reaching out and asking before it boils over, right? So lesson one is you need to realize that your needs are just as important as everybody else's, and if you're not asking for them to be met in your life, then you're going to overflow. And that self-medication of cutting or pulling or picking or any of the things that harm yourself with, that's going to be the way that you manage your pain. And I get it, because it's a strategy. It's just a bit of a shitty strategy compared to what you deserve. It's not that it's a terrible one. I'm not berating you. I'm not judging you. I'm saying it's just not as good as you deserve it to be, right? There are better strategies, one of which is reducing the anxiety, the conflict inside, the feelings of struggle by actually saying to somebody before you self-harm, I'm going to self-harm if I don't manage this better, because I feel those feelings coming up. You see, there was a point where you knew you might self-harm, and what you did is you didn't ask for some support and help. You didn't pick up an app like Calm Harm and think, I'm going to work this now. You didn't go and put some meditation on. You didn't call a friend, and you didn't do that because you felt like you didn't deserve it to some degree. that this is just something that you have to accept as a part of who you are, and you tripped over your feelings in that respect, and you ended up connecting with that need to self-soothe. So first of all, you didn't fail. 2 years is a huge amount of time to have done without self-harm. It's a massive, massive celebration that you have got to a point after 2 years of abstaining where it's got difficult and you've triggered an old, outmoded behaviour that used to be useful but isn't now. It's not useful anymore. One of the reasons you're feeling all those negative feelings is because it's saying, hey, this isn't going to solve anything. That's great. Again, you've had 2 years, a bit like if you'd not drank for 2 years. One drink doesn't mean that you're now back where you were at the beginning. It doesn't. All that progress that you've made it. Do not let that part of your brain that says, oh, if I'm not perfect, I'm not sorted, I'm not healed, I'm not okay. Don't let that chip away at all that work you've done. 2 years is an enormous amount of time to have succeeded in not harming. You had a bad day. You didn't work your plan, how you know you need to work your plan. Whatever you've been doing to get through those 2 years, you've already got the tools, you've already got the keys, you've already got the resources, you've already figured it out. Now it's about saying, that was a tiny, tiny bump in the road. It's a bump in the road that I've realised I don't want to become a massive crash. I'm just going to accept there's a bit of damage and I'm going to move forward and I'm going to get that damage sorted. If you see it like that, instead of this big catastrophic, oh my God, I'm back to square one, we minimise the reality of what's happened in a good way. We don't give it the volume. We don't let it be expansive and destructive in our world. That's what you need to do. I mentioned Calm Harm because it's an app that you can download. There is a cost associated with it. It's not a fortune. I mentioned things like meditation because you can go on my free appy, or you can go on the website that I've got, or you can go on YouTube. It's all free there. You can do that and listen to meditation when you're feeling that way as well. Also, that thing about when you know it's building and you're afraid that you're going to do it, speak it, say it, acknowledge it. It's perfectly okay. You're not a bad person for not knowing how to cope sometimes and wanting to harm. Just use a different resource. Find somebody, call somebody, text somebody for some help, do anything. Break the cognition. Also, I know this is like a really simple thing, but distraction is effective to some degree. That might be going and grabbing some ice out of the fridge and like kind of using it in our hands and like just letting it really connect with the cold, so we kind of distract ourselves that way. It might be sitting in front of something and thinking, let me think of 100 uses for this box. Something that breaks the cognition. They're really helpful exercises as well. But the most important thing to do is you are not back where you were. You've not lost any ground. You've just realised that you had a bad day, you acted on impulse, you've realised it's not for you anymore, and you want to move forward. And most importantly, you have the plan already. You've succeeded for 2 years. You've got this. Own that feeling instead of fearing that somehow by not being perfect, you've somehow destroyed your success. You haven't. And also, I would argue, why don't you write down the things that made a difference to you? Because the thing about my master's when I did my eating disorders, it was all about autoethnographic research, the story of the self, and also interviews with others who'd been through eating disorders themselves to listen to their stories. Because my belief is that the healing is there in the people who've healed themselves. I really listen more to people who've gone through it than therapists who tell me about it. I really do. I listen to the keys of the individuals who tell me how they healed. What is your healing journey? There is so much good stuff there. If you can tell others, if you can write it down, if you can really get your head around, what did I do that meant that I managed to stop this really all-encompassing feeling that led to this kind of behaviour? What were the steps I took? Because that is gold for other people as well. And if you can articulate that and write that down and share that to some degree, I mean it, it will have profound impact on other harmers. So see yourself as a loaded book of advice and opportunity for others to engage in that process as well. It's just an adage that I'd add there. I'm nearly 40. Is it too late to retrain in a new career? The average age of people at Manchester University on my first advanced diploma in counselling after I'd done my undergrad degree in psychology, and I didn't do that until I was like 25. My therapy training, one of my therapy trainings, the big one to become a BACP registered practitioner. I think the average age was probably 50. if I'm really honest. When I did my undergrad degree, so when I was 18 and I started there, our average was about 33. And remember, we had a huge amount of undergrads who were like 17 and 18. I mean, so 18 and 19. Some were 17 from Scotland. So 40, the word life begins at 40 is absolutely true with careers. My God, you've got another 30 years. You have longer to work than you have worked. It is not fundamentally too old by a long way. More importantly, you're in a place where you now know what you want. More importantly, you'll have life experience to bring to your new career and a whole heap of skills that means that you are going to be an absolute contender in the workplace and you will be taken seriously. At 40 years of age, I cannot understand the difference between one who looks 30, one who looks 40, one who looks 50. People have all merged into a very similar looking state. You know, women and men don't really age in the same way that we used to years ago. So the workplace, fundamentally, I don't know whether I've got a 55-year-old sat next to me or a 25-year-old sat next to me most of the time. Don't let chronology dictate where you're going. Let your visions, dreams, and ambitions do. My God, life would be awful if we didn't live fully and ended our lives thinking, well, I wish I'd done. Just do it now. 40 is nothing. Absolutely nothing. You're only just growing up. So it's great that you figured it out. Take a risk, make a choice, move in direction, let me know how it goes, and do not ever let age be a limiter, ever. Could you advise on being left with 2 young children? I'm struggling to understand how someone can be so cold and selfish. He's moved on and I'm stuck. Okay, so I was a single mum for 5 years. My husband at the time had an affair with one of my closest friends. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and I was broke. Neither of us had a lot of money anyway. I worked 3 days a week running a mental health service. And he had a nice job, but not a well-paid job. We both worked in the services. He was a social worker. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to lose my home. And it was a very real reality. And what brought me into my career these days is a need to earn more money and to figure out how to hustle in a way that made me at least financially secure. But it was hard work for at least 3 of those 5 years, yeah? And it can be really difficult when you're stuck at home thinking, well, I can't go out at night because I don't have freedom anymore and I don't have finances anymore. And my life is dictated by these 2 wonderful little souls that I just want to protect more than anything. And if you, like me and your partner, kind of left and then got on with their life but didn't have to necessarily see the kids as often as you did, not that that's a bad thing, and I'm blessed and glad that I had full custody in that respect. Don't get me wrong, my ex and me get on really, really well and is somebody who's been involved in the kids' lives all the way through. But I'm saying that I had the fundamental childcare and it was me most of the time. And you do have your life limited and it can feel like they're flying and having a great time. But listen, you're creating the story of you being the hero in these children's lives. And ultimately, their childhood is going to be like the blink of an eye. And I promise you this, you are fundamentally the hero in those children's eyes. You are the all-loving, all-present, all-perfect mother. And even though sometimes that can feel like a curse for you, it is such a blessing. It's a blessing you aren't aware of just yet because you're lost in all of this situation and you feel like essentially he's got it easy and you've got it tough. And I'm telling you now, it's not that way. You aren't moving on in the way that he is moving on because you are still very present in your children's lives and also you took seriously your relationship. That's a great thing. You don't want to not take a relationship seriously. Grieving a relationship that you got involved in because you thought you were going to have children and spend the rest of your life with, that's a great, great way of being. It means that you're steadfast, you're loyal, you're committed. It means that you've got the mettle to make relationships work. Okay, it didn't work out and that's good because you don't want to be with somebody that doesn't love you fully. You don't want to be in a relationship where you question his loyalty. You don't want to be in a relationship where you throw away. You're more than that. You're a creator of life. You have examples of those in your home every single day. And there is this real opportunity now to be like, you know what? I've got to keep the best things, which are my babies. And I get to be the hero in their story. And then I see myself through their eyes. And all I will see is the most beautiful vision of who I am. Like in my worst days, in my early life, I would look at my boys and I would see that all they saw in me was perfection. At a time where I felt like I was nothing, they just saw wonder. And I started thinking, I'm just going to see me through my children's eyes, and then maybe I'll get a reflection of something that will help me. And it did help me. And you need to start doing that. Secondly, don't feel sorry for yourself. And that sounds awful. And I know it sounds judgy. I'm not. I'm saying don't feel sorry for yourself. Your life isn't over. This is not something to mourn in a way that limits you. This is something to motivate you through it. You are going to have a whole new opportunity in the future to fully be loved by another human being. And in between that and the future, what are you going to do with your life? How are you going to make your life move on? Might not be relationship wise. It might be about learning new skills, taking up passion projects. It might be about creating a social network that actually makes you feel full of life and opportunity. It's about potential, not about what's been, but what will be, about the present and at some point the future of what you're creating. So don't look to him and build pictures around what you think his life is like. His life might be awful in a few years. Don't cherry pick your perception. Most people, when we think they're having a great time, they aren't really. Most people's lives is just pretty average with a few ups and downs here and there. But as long as we're passionately pursuing what is of meaning to us within our life, then we have an option to make a journey of loss that is ultimately what we go through in our journeys of life into something that is less painful than it could be. And that's what I'm saying. If you look in his direction, somebody who's left you, somebody who's given up this beautiful opportunity to be with you and your children, then you'll always be losing. Whereas if you look at your children, you imagine the incredible fabric and tapestry you're going to create in this future with them, and it's all to play for, and you are everything to those children, then suddenly your self-worth will feel burgeoned and you'll realise that you are blessed. And then that will help you build some confidence to realise that there are so many opportunities for you out there. Be open. I always say this to people who've ended up in relationships where they've gone sour, that somewhere right now in this very moment in this world there is somebody having a cup of tea, drinking a beer at a pub, at work, and they are your life partner, and all that separates you is time. But in the end, wherever it will be, you'll meet, and then everything will make sense, and you won't for 1 minute wish the relationship that had come to an end had lasted, because it will all make sense in that moment. Just trust that process and trust that that process is coming for you, and that he was not made for you, even though you were gifted these incredible wondrous creatures, these beautiful children, and therefore it gives great meaning to that relationship. Your journey has ended so that another one can begin. Invite that journey in. Any advice for a parent dealing with a child who has attachment issues due to trauma? It can be very violent and aggressive, sometimes with no noticeable trigger. I'm very concerned about him. Really glad that you're able to acknowledge that there are attachment issues, because they're very challenging for a child. The fact that he's been traumatized is something that will not make sense to a child. We talk in adult and therapized connections in the way that we use language, so you understand what's going on for him. He doesn't. So he doesn't know he's traumatized. He just knows that he is struggling. He just knows that as far as he is concerned, he is in pain, and he doesn't know how to respond to that pain. So therefore he gets frustrated or angry or upset or out of control, because the management of these difficult emotions is so overwhelming for him that he isn't clear on how to effectively change his state in a more grown-up way that we would as adults. Not all adults, lots of adults don't handle themselves well, but let's put it into the context of an adult who's well-adjusted enough to do so. So essentially, you need to help him figure that forward, and that can be really difficult. There are two levels to this. One is the professional. So if you're really worried about his attachment issues and trauma, and you think that maybe CAMS might be worth a referral, you'll be waiting a long time, but that's okay. CAMS have got a whole range of professionals, and they will be able to meet him at some point in the future and ideally start to explore intricately what's going on for him within the trauma experience. Arguably, you could also look for a therapist who specialises in child trauma who's private, but that will be a cost. But nonetheless, it's worth pursuing if it's your child and you can afford it. But let's put the professional to the side for a minute and bring back in the personal, the parenting. Like, first of all, the best parent that exists is the parent who understands a child has attachment issues and meets them. The worst parent that exists is a parent who creates attachment issues and then denies allowing that child to forge a great relationship with them, thus sustaining them and damaging them further. So your child is in a great position. It has a loving parent who also wants to heal the attachment issues that have been created through the trauma and is a safe place for that to be dealt with. So you're already in a good position. Secondly, how do you meet the emotions? Well, if a child is really frustrated and clearly frustrated, they need calm. You have to look at their emotional prompts. They're not going to be able to figure that out. They aren't. Like I said, loads of adults are really bad at this as well. When they feel frustrated, maybe they're starting to get angry and they don't know why, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter why. What matters is they're feeling it. So then we have to help them diffuse it, and we meet that with calm. So that can be literally getting down on their level and saying, you seem really frustrated. What can we both do to go and stop that frustration? Why don't we go for a walk outside? Why don't we go and play in the garden? Why don't we go and do something like dance around and listen to some music? Let's meet it with something that can soothe it. So exercise will soothe it and calm will soothe it. Meditation with an older child would be really effective. If it's a younger child, I have them on my YouTube channel, even for very young children. Lovely relaxation tapes that you can kind of play to them and just help them to kind of soothe. If they're angry, they need to be taught calm, and like a calmness that is all about relaxing, taking a step back, breathing. I'd teach them diaphragmatic breathing habits. Again, I've got those on my website. You can look online, there are loads of people who do it, but I teach them diaphragmatic breathing. I do that when they're not angry so that they understand how to utilize that effectively. If they were starting to punch, well, that can be really scary, because obviously when a child is punching you, one, it's bloody painful, and two, you're like, oh my God, my kid's out of control, they're going to end up in prison. But if you look at it from the point of, this child has got so much in them and they've got so much challenging experience emotionally that they just don't know what to do with it, and you know you're a safe place, and if they punch you they know that you're going to come back, but equally they have this idea that maybe they'll be abandoned and they want you to prove that they'll come back, and all of this mad stuff that's going on in their head, but to us is very linear. Imagine containing that in a child's body. So in circumstances like that, you know, I hug. And no, everybody has their own way of doing it, but if a child is hitting, it was always a hug. I mean, back in the day when I used to work with children who had really severe problems, we were allowed to do that. The world's gone mad because apparently a few people are completely untrustworthy with children. Now we can't do half of the things that actually make a massive difference to children, such as being a compassionate adult who works with them. But just wrapping your arms around them and just soothing and rocking and whispering, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, really quietly and in rhythm is an incredibly soothing thing, helping your breathing to coordinate with their breathing, really allowing that synchronicity and connection. They're things that are really, really powerful. Also, look at how you can be strategic. So every single night, concentrate on positives. I do gratitude jars. I always used to do that with my kids. Not so much now because they're like adult teenagers, so to speak, and therefore it's less easy to kind of get them to think about 3 things that they are grateful for, 1 thing that they struggled with but learned from. But do that with your child. Help to create the neurotransmitters and neurons that connect with each other on a positive way. Help build those connections in the brain, the positive ones, because the more you do it, the more their brain will coordinate with that. Also, when you go to bed at night, read. I mean it, read to them. There are so many reasons why you should read to your child, no matter how old they are. Like I'm talking about even if they're like 10, 11, go upstairs and sit with them and read. It calms them, get them off the screens, because that helps to reduce the over-exaggerated energy within the brain because of all the blue and white light. Settle them down. Ideally as well, hot bath 2 hours before they go to bed, really hot. Get them in it, then let them cool down for 2 hours, get the screens off, get them settled, cuddle them, read. Because that says, you matter, I'm attached to you. There's lots of sensory experiences. You're ultimately reducing the stress and anxiety by taking away the blue and white light, and then you're reading to them, which is that kind of playful experience, parental-wise, where a child is like, this person wants to connect and commit to me. That's a powerful experience. They won't be taking that in that context, but it will go in there on a subliminal context. They're the things that I would be doing. Same with things like massage, you know, like on the feet, on the hands, on the back of the neck, on the head. anything that says, I'm present, I'm here, I've got you. Because the child with attachment issues is always so scared that somebody's going to abandon them. They create these impulses to some degree to prove that they're a worthless, useless piece of nothing that can be abandoned and treated badly. You have to kind of recognize that and then additionalize how wrong they are by all this extra care and attention, whilst also helping them to fundamentally understand why they feel that frustration. Some people will also do things like art therapy. Some people will actually do things like play therapy, where they'll just sit with a child and allow them to play out some of the trauma in the toys. Like I said as well, if you really think there's a struggle that's bigger than you, which is completely acceptable to admit, lots of parents need some additional help. Look at getting a referral to CAMHS. It's going to take time, but your child is absolutely worth it, and you know that. That's why you're asking me this.
She's already had CAMHS, no luck.
You've had CAMHS and you've no luck. Let me just see that. So you've not had any CAMHS at all? You've not had any help with CAMHS? I'm really sorry that you've not had any help with CAMHS. Did you have intervention and that wasn't successful for you? Or is it more that they didn't want to help, just out of interest for you? It would be interesting for me to know. But even so, let's put CAMHS to the side then, as we did initially, then do those things that I'm talking about. Like I said, trauma is a horrible thing for a child to experience. To process it takes a long time, and often it can take years, and sometimes it requires therapy. But arguably the biggest thing is, if I have an attachment issue, what is the message what is my emotional prompt that I need to receive? And it is, you have meaning, I am here, I'm going nowhere. No matter how your behaviour may sometimes seem intolerable, I have got you. That is the sturdiness required for these issues. So then the child can be like, okay, this has been difficult. I've had bad things happen to me, but I have this really sure thing in my life. You know, it's something I say to my children a great deal, because many of you know my children have had incredible trauma happen to them. And one of the things that I will say, which is a bit of a mantra, and they're obviously older than your child most likely, but one of the things that I will say to my child when they're struggling is always the same. I cannot protect them from life. Life is always going to happen. My mantra has always been, life is a journey of loss, undertake to do it joyfully, because I can't protect them from pain. It's going to happen, and wow, has it happened to them. However, what I can say is this: they'll always be warm, they'll always be safe, they'll always be loved, they'll always be fed, and I'll always be present for them as long as I can be present for them. And I will provide all of those things. I can't provide the rest, that's on them, but I'm going to give them this constant, unwavering, secure understanding that no matter where they go, what they do, how they feel, even how they act in many ways, I will be absolutely stoic and completely fixed in my support of them. Even when they've made horrible mistakes, I will still be that loving, safe space. Doesn't mean I wouldn't be somebody who questioned what they did. Doesn't mean I wouldn't be somebody who even judged some of the things they did. But nothing, and I mean come hell or high water, rich or poor, bad or good, I will love my child, and I will love them as strongly now as I will when I take my last breath. And you can provide that for them, and by providing that, it's really powerful. So arguably I do that, and all the other things that I said as well. My partner has tried to kill himself in the last 6 months. I've been feeling really low. I'm fatter than ever, and I've got really low tolerance for people in general, and then I feel bad. To give you an idea, my dad killed himself a few years ago. Sorry about that. I'm 37 now. I've left 4 jobs in the past 2 months. My partner has tried to kill himself twice in the last 6 months. I feel bad. Any advice? Okay, so 1, you feel very low and you're fatter than ever. Okay, so that's one issue. You're feeling really low in your mood and you feel fatter than ever, which means that you probably are in a place now where you need to think about taking some control of your health and wellness, right? You know, people put weight on when they're struggling. I mean, I know there are people who are like massive body positive and they're quite happy being overweight and so on and so forth. And like, all power to whatever your position. I don't have any judgment of that. I just want people to feel happy. But you know, if you're feeling fatter than ever because it's not good for you, that's not a bad space to be, because it's a progressive space. It means you've acknowledged something you want to change. You can't change what you can't acknowledge. It's as simple as that. And so that's a good place. However, don't beat yourself up. You've had a really traumatic time. Anybody who's had 2 suicide attempts with their partner in 6 months and lost their dad to suicide and has felt completely demotivated and numb to the world, you know, you're eating crap probably, or overeating, because of the fact that you're just feel exhausted, helpless, bored, stressed. These are all big antecedents in the kind of behaviours you're talking about. And what you don't need to be doing is then beating yourself up because you look in the mirror and you're like, great, I've put on weight as well. Like, you need to be nice to yourself. Now, I don't mean be nice to yourself and be like, hey, be nice, just keep on doing what I'm doing. It makes me feel like comfortable when I'm eating that stuff, because actually the opposite is happening. It's making you feel really crap. But I'm saying be nice to yourself. Where's the, wow, in 6 months, I've been through 2 horrific experiences when my partner's tried to kill himself and I'm surviving a suicide of my father. I mean, to survive that, bear in mind that when somebody kills themselves that you love, you are like 10 times more likely to go and kill yourself, because it's so tragic and traumatizing and devastating that you don't want to be here. You've managed to stay here. Secondly, you've managed to support your partner in spite of the fact that they're in situations where their distress is so huge they might not be around for you. Like, you don't need to beat yourself up. You need to be wrapping your arms around yourself and saying, good girl for just living and surviving and staying, because you have been through a terrible time. I don't think you're acknowledging that. You're just reactionary now. You're like, oh, I go to work, I don't like the people, I leave. No, you are traumatized. And you're so traumatized that your patience around other people is tiny. And the reason that you've got that is because you cannot believe when you go into work and people moan about the weather, or moan about restrictions, or moan about COVID, or moan about a cold. You're like, what is wrong with you? You just need to shut up and realize that, you know what, the bigger problems in the world. And that's not their fault that you feel that way. It's your experience that makes you feel that way. You are carrying this overload of trauma, and that makes everything else fade into insignificance. You've got a partner who's tried killing themselves twice. You can't empathize with people who are worried about a relationship, but to them, that's real. You know, their relationship's a real big problem. You can't see that because you're traumatized. So firstly, you need to have some full vision shone on the fact that you're dealing with high-level trauma. You are feeling exhausted, angry, bored, resentful, because this stuff happened to you. You didn't create it, and yet look at you, you're living it. This happened to you. And that makes you feel like, what is the point? I can try hard, I can do this, I can do that. Still stuff happens to me. And that's one of the hardest things about life, that we can't control what happens to us through other people's actions, but what we can control is what we choose to experience in our own world, control-wise, such as we can choose to eat healthily and love ourselves. We can choose to exercise because we deserve it. We can choose to work in a job that we think we will love, not one that we just put up with because we've got to pay the bills. But also, we will listen to that trauma to inform how we feel. So if you're quitting jobs left, right, and centre because everything annoys you, it's not the job. It's you and your reactions to trauma. And you just haven't got the energy because you're traumatized, so you just pack it in. You can't be bothered. That's a trauma response to deep-seated grief. You need some therapy. I know people can't all afford it. I think you need to go and get yourself to the doctors and say, look, I need some free therapy. I'm dealing with my husband, my partner who's tried killing himself twice, and the uncertainty of whether he's going to be around. I'm dealing with my father's suicide. I'm dealing with not being able to feel excited about life. I'm dealing with self-hate, which is why I'm eating food that makes me feel bad about myself, and I'm putting weight on, and that makes me feel like really unhappy. You need to understand that you are reacting to pain. You're not a failure. You're not fatter than ever. You're wearing your feelings. You're wearing your absolute feelings because horrible stuff has happened to you. And you need to understand that you are not the cause of that. And therefore, no matter how much you eat, you're never going to cure it because it's not yours to cure. That somebody else needs to manage their mental health with your support. Your partner needs to. He needs to get support. You can't be responsible for his feelings and actions. You can only hold him within that by being a supportive partner. You can't change it though. It's not your job. So eating his problems won't help you. But you need a safe space to go so you can have a conversation with somebody and be like, I am going through all of this stuff. And from there, start putting it into a position where you feel like you've given yourself the space and time to explore something incredibly painful, and stop beating yourself up. When it comes down to the jobs, the other thing is maybe you need some time out. Maybe you do. Maybe you need a couple of months to just like be like, yeah, I'm just going to concentrate on me. And then get yourself to a point where you've reduced some of that anxiety. You started to help yourself feel like you deserve more. And then when you go to a job, have a conversation with whoever employs you and be like, listen, I've had some really difficult things happen, A, B, and C. I'm going to need some potential support on A, B, and C, and open that conversation, because otherwise you're always going to walk around thinking, Jesus Christ, people are so useless at coping. It's what it does to you. It's what suicide does to you. After my dad killed himself, I literally used to go around and think to myself, why are people bothered about masks in stores? That's a great example. I'd see people being nasty to people about them not wearing a mask, and I'd be like, how can you be bothered about that when my dad killed himself, right? That can be a really clear, resentful voice. And then what you have to be like is like, all right, because people are scared, and like I need to meet that with compassion. And you need to do that with you. You need to meet yourself with compassion. And you also need to understand that everybody else around you who you haven't got a lot of patience with, to them, these are big things that are happening to them. And it's just so unfortunate you had a bigger thing happen to you. And therefore, you now see other things quite minimally compared to the reality of what they are for other people. And that can be a break between how you connect. So you need to reconnect by just being open and honest about what you've been through. I could go on for hours about that. Guys, I hope it's been all right today. Like I said, I'm sorry it's not been on Facebook tonight. Hopefully in the next few weeks they will reinstate me. Who knows? Not that I care. I couldn't care less whether I'm on Facebook or not, but I do like doing my lives on it. Dolly's come to say night. Haven't you, Dolly? Have you come to say night? You have come to say night, haven't you? She's come to say night. Oh, she's licking my ear. Ugh, bit weird. Take care. I'll see you soon. If you join me on a Wednesday, I'll see you for the crime. Kenny's crime cult. The trolls are hating me taking that. Oh, you can't say the word cult. Yes, I can. I just did. Kenny's crime cult forever. Simple as. Take care, guys. See you soon.